if you're out in the heat and it's like, no place to hide, what has to happen is as soon as the heat breaks, you got to consciously back off on the hydration. Doesn't mean eliminate it, but you've got to consciously back off because your thirst triggers are still geared for that high temperature, no place to hide. It takes about an hour or two for the body to recalibrate that need. And if you overhydrate, then it really jacks things up. And
well, you're putting in more liquid than you're sweating. So the body goes, hey, I'm not sweating this out and I got to store it somewhere, and it starts storing it in extremities and your gut and everywhere else in the tissue. So I definitely experienced that. After the race. I know that's where I think from when you make the transition from 100 to 200 plus, your race nutrition and hydration becomes even more important to dial it in according to your unique sweat rate per hour, and really knowing yourself that way. I've done a lot of testing over the last year and a half since Moab, and I know what my sweat rate is in different temperatures now. I know how much to consume at say 80 degrees versus 40 degrees, and so forth. And I've also even had my sodium concentration levels tested, that precision hydration test. So it's like a medical grade test. So now I have that data point too.
That actually will change though. It's going to give you that concentration at a place in time, because like early in the season, like when you come out from the winter into spring, those first spring races where it'll turn into the mid or high 70s and people are just dropping like flies, your sweat concentration at that point is really higher than say it's in July and August, because your body will adapt, and you're still going to sweat a ton of sodium, but the concentration is going to change as the adaptation changes. I mean, hydration is just one of the most dynamic aspects.
Well, yes, but yes, sweat rate per hour is going to change a lot, but concentration actually isn't. That's one of the data points that we've seen. That's actually one of the data points we've seen.
That one. Yeah.
Well, we can agree to disagree, but based on the data points that they've tested at different times of the year, they've tested over 10,000 people, and they're not seeing they're seeing slight changes, but nothing that would constitute a major change in your strategy of how much sodium per liter drink rate.
That's yes, because you have reservoirs, but your concentration does change, and your needs, you have to up the sodium in the spring because of that, because it just until you adapt, like you say, in terms of your overall strategy, because you're sweating so much more, you still need that much sodium. That's what you're saying. But your actual concentration, there's some papers. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say what we're finding, some of the stuff like, even the Western States study from 2015, I think it's kind of worthless data personally. And I know some people
don't get me started on that.
People will get that and the whole Noakes's waterlog thing. I don't agree with that data at all. And based on some of this newer testing protocols that have only been out for a couple of years now, but they've tested a big cohort now, and they've retested people, and they're seeing that concentration of sodium per liter of sweat not change much. It's pretty much a genetic number per the individual, but we are seeing sweat rate per hour change. So two different things. Yeah, so the sweat rate per hour changes a lot. The concentration of sodium in that liter of sweat does not change much.
Okay, it's slightly.
So that's how my coaching has evolved on that data point than what it used to be.
Well, and absolutely, because hydration is as critical as the actual fueling. Because if your hydration's off, your fueling will really tank. And I think especially if you're fat adapted, it becomes more crucial, and it actually is a big driver of how many calories you'll need. I think if your hydration is on, you need less calories.
I agree with that, because one of the things I've seen in the way we're coaching it too is that we're seeing if a lot of times people are mistaking getting their hydration off, like amount to drink per hour and say concentration of sodium and all that, they're mistaking the symptoms of dehydration or with food, with calories, with
That's
bonking.
right.
And then they try to push a bunch of calories, but then they're off on their sodium concentration, and then they can't absorb the food, and then they're not processing the food. And so then we got GI stress, and then you're basically just throwing you're throwing more dry wood on a fire and making the fire bigger instead of controlling it. And I think there's a lot of mistakes that happen when it comes to race nutrition, that people mistake that they need more calories or they're not getting enough calories per hour when they actually aren't getting enough. They're not dialing in their hydration and their electrolyte balance.
Totally agree with you. And I think that I totally agree, because when your hydration is spot on, especially with the electrolytes and the sodium, you need less calories. And I think what happens is what you're saying, I'll say just another way. People mistake that for a hunger trigger because they're craving salty food.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, another couple of points to kind of add to what you're saying. I'm totally in agreement with that 2015 Western States study. It is beyond misguided. I think the intentions are good, but telling people that for a 100-mile race, especially when it's in the heat and you don't need supplemental sodium, I mean, your plasma volume is controlled by sodium.
Yeah, and that's where I really get frustrated, because I was there 2 years ago. I didn't go last year, but 2 years ago when I was helping you with the booth, and that's one of the things I noticed, that they're still pushing, the medical staff still pushing at the pre-race check-in and saying you don't need to supplement sodium, and I'm just sitting there shaking my head. I'm like, you're putting people in danger right now.
Yes. I mean, especially if it's like, that's a basic thing. If you're sweating, you're losing sodium. Sodium controls extracellular fluid. And it's like, once you start getting depleted on sodium and you exhaust your liver and bone reservoirs, you'll start to pull potassium out of your cells. And that's when things go to hell in a handbasket. So,
and you don't usually see that start till about 8 to 12 hours in. You start to see that that's when you see people really crater, is somewhere in the 8 to 12 hour range, and they start to have some symptoms and starting to feel bad, and their blood volume's dropping, and then you're putting putting them in.
Yeah, or they're feeling worse, right? They're probably by about 3 to 4 hours in, their probably performance is subpar, but they're not like cratering, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And the other thing that's probably good for you to know about waterlogged is that was written before Tim had his epiphany about carbs.
Interesting. So, I didn't know. I couldn't remember when that was written, but
yeah, that's something key for you to know, because if you understand that, if you knew that, now you understand the frame of how it was written. So of course that's all changed now. So
yeah, and even the ISSN is recommending 600 to 800 milligrams of sodium per liter drink rate.
Right. Did you hear what I don't know if Jesse told you this, but Leona divided this last year?
Oh no, I didn't hear.
21 grams he took in.
Of sodium?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's why he and I have been having he definitely had some issues in the last, like, probably 100K of that race. With just some water weight retention and stuff like that. He and I have had a couple of calls since then, just to chat through like how to remedy it. He definitely was not taking enough sodium later in the race.
Yeah, he took a lot.
But it's hard, because especially if you're detaching sodium intake from your drink rate, meaning you're trying to take it, and if you don't have those together in a 200, when you're sleep deprived, you can't even remember the last time you took a pill. You're like, did I just take a salt tab, or was that like 2 hours ago? You're like, your short-term memory's out the window, And that's the one thing I experienced at Moab, was just that detach of like reality of like when I took something and couldn't remember even if I took something 15 minutes ago. I could have taken a salt pill, an SCAP 15 minutes ago, and I wouldn't even remembered. So I've changed my strategy to tie it to my drink rate now. So my sodium's mixed with my tailwind. So like the caloric, my baseline carb calories in the race are mixed with extra sodium to equal how much I need per liter. And so then I don't even have to think about it.
So you're adding extra sodium on top of the sodium that's in the tailwind, right?
In tailwind into the mix. Yep, exactly. Yep. To go with the liter drink rate. And then all I have to do is worry about my drink rate per hour, depending on sweat rate and heat.
And so this is important for the audience to understand, is you got to, when you're doing exercise in warm to hot to super hot conditions, because hydration is so dynamic, that sodium level can go through the roof. And because of the cultural mindset of sodium, you have to watch your sodium levels. People don't realize how much sodium they need, right? And then the other thing,
mine stays consistent per liter drink rate. Now, in really hot conditions, I might bump it up maybe 200 milligrams per liter or something like that. Not a ton, but I take in about 1,000 milligrams per liter drink rate of sodium.
That's right on point. That's right. We see anywhere from 800 to 1,500. A bigger guy will be that 1,500. Like when I did Western States, in 2006, during the heat of the day, I was taking in like 1,500.
Well, and this is where the precision hydration medical test. So this, I don't know if you know the background of this, but it's a coil that goes on your arm. There's a solution in a tube and a coil, and you sweat into that solution, pull it out with a syringe, and run it through this briefcase machine, and then that gives you a unique concentration of sodium per liter sweat rate for you. And we're seeing outliers as low as 200 milligrams per liter and as high as 2,400 milligrams per liter. So we have big outliers. And in my cohort of athletes, I've had probably 80% of my people get tested, and we have 600 to 1950, right? The average is 900, but we have outliers at 13, 14, 1,500, 1,900. Those kind of people, if they're taking 600 or 800 milligrams of sodium per liter, they're not even close. And they're going to have horrible races after 12 hours in a hot race, because they're going to be putting themselves in a hyponatremic state.
Yeah. It's kind of a moving target, because you do have a pretty big reservoir of sodium in your liver. And that's one of the reasons why I tell people, do not prehydrate, because most people, that whole mantra of prehydration, where people drink a ton of water 48, 24 hours before, all you're doing is tapping into that reservoir and then you're not going to have it on race day.
Yes, I think that's a really good point, Peter, because that's pushed around a lot, to prehydrate. Now, I do agree with prehydrating if you're doing it with electrolytes, if you're doing it with sodium, because like, for example, like products like, Element or LMNT or Relight, which neither one of those have calories, right? But they're high sodium concentration electrolyte drinks. So it's like a powder you're putting in your water. So it's going to mineralize your water. So we have people prehydrate, but meaning they load sodium a little bit. So they're preloading a little bit of sodium. So you might retain a little water right before the race, but that's okay. Who cares if you gain 1 pound before the race, if it's going to be a hot race, because you're going to lose that at some point during the race, just because it's so hot. So we'll have people, do a little bit of concentration loading of sodium per liter when they're drinking that water, but not over consuming water.
Yeah, I've actually got a better system, and you'll be very familiar with it, because I was talking with I think I was talking to Peter the other day about this. It's what I tell people is 2 nights out from a race, medium rare steak and a loaded baked potato. Night before, 2 bowls of miso soup and sushi to satiation.
Okay.
Because so the 2
It's
bowls.
a really high sodium soup.
Right. And then the fish has a lot of sodium in it too, because that's what helps keep fresh sushi fish. So plus you get the resistant starch of the sushi rice, right? So
Yep.
it's a good way to kind of do a strategic carb and bolus with some sodium and enjoy yourself, and
Yeah. Right.
not break the bank. 'Cause tell people, just eat enough sushi to where you're satiated, not just, not like we did that one day in last year after the testing at that all you can eat sushi place.
Yeah, exactly.
Right,
Cool.
right. So, and like I said, the other thing that's real key to coach people, and I learned this the hard way because I've got my sweat. I can hydrate. Because I've been doing it for years. I made the mistakes, but like at Western States, when I did it, it was the year it got super hot. Right, that was the year only half the field finished, where Morrison
Oh
collapsed on
yeah.
the
Yep.
track. Right.
Yep.
He
Yep.
was
Yep.
because he got in his
2006.
hydration. Right, 2006, and what happened to me was, I was doing like 1,500, 2,000 milligrams of sodium an hour in the heat because it got up to 115, 118. I think Miller's defeat recorded 115 or 118. And I was going through there in the middle of the day and then through the canyons. And I was just like, 48, 60 ounces out of water an hour
Right.
and just pounding 4 or 5 S caps. And I had no problems. But then what happened was when the heat broke, and that happened about at the river crossing, really. It was like, I was still like, as it got dark and the heat broke, I was still thirsty. So it took a couple hours for that thirst trigger to readjust, and I picked up,
Yep.
by the time I got to ALT, I picked up 5 pounds of water weight.
Right.
And I was like peeing every 10 minutes. It was like, I started
Yeah.
to pee it off. But the other thing that people don't realize is when you pick up that kind of water weight, the balls of your feet, you have that, you have that swelling. If all of a sudden you're prone to blisters.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Right.
That's a big one in 200s. That's one thing we've been working through with 200 coaching is not overhydrating at night and adjusting drink rate when the temps drop, because otherwise you'll like you said, you're going to retain a bunch of water and then you have a bunch of like fluid in the tissue and then you're going to get
That's right.
big fluid filled blisters in your feet.
That's exactly right. It promotes the blisters. And then when you get the blisters, you get the fluid filling and it's just a mess. So it's really interesting. It's really important that as soon as you note the heat breaking, you got to realize your body's going to tell you, you still need to drink a lot, but you got to say, oh, got to back off on this.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's pretty interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we're doing it. Not only were we personally, we've been promoting the getting this test, but just to see what your concentration is per liter of sweat. But then we're also, the other piece of the puzzle, and we're having people do the scale, like a home digital scale test, where you're going to you'd weigh yourself without any clothes on. Weigh yourself without any clothes on, record the weight, record the temperature outside, go run for 1 hour aerobic, don't pee, don't drink, come back, towel all the sweat off, take your clothes off and weigh again, and then record the loss. And so that's going to be your loss at those temperatures. So we're having people chart from like 30 degrees to 100 degrees and at least get 3 data points so you can extrapolate the data to other temperatures every 5 or 10 degrees. And then people can like look at the high and the low of the forecasted race window and get a ballpark guess of what they need to consume per hour, how much liquid they need to. So, and that gets it even more dialed to the individual, because what we found by doing that, we're finding people who, like, for example, I lose at 55 degrees, I lose 750 milliliters, right? So, but I have an athlete in Fort Collins, for example, that at the same temperature loses 1.5 liters. He loses double what I lose. So he has to drink double what I do at 55 degrees because it's very unique to the individual.
Yeah. Yeah. I used to do that too. It's pretty, it really brings things into perspective, and people have to understand that that's not just water weight, that's fluid weight, which means you need the electrolytes to be able to transit that water through the digestive tract into your body and then out through sweat.
Right.
And people just don't realize just how, much they can put out, in a thing. And yeah, we have this reserve, but like you say, once you get deep into an ultra, that's when things go really wrong, right?
Yeah, exactly.
In race, it's as big, if not bigger, a factor for a fat adapted athlete than the nutrition side, right?
Well, yeah, once you're fat adapted, you don't need that many calories per hour. So
Well,
hydration and electrolyte balance becomes one of your most important. And I feel like it's your Achilles heel. Like if you don't, that's the one thing you can blow in a race, and you're really not gonna. It's hard to come back from something like that, because once you get way, way, way behind, it takes a long time to dig back out of it.
That's absolutely true. It goes back to what I was saying before. It's like once you've depleted your sodium and you start pulling potassium out of your cells, because sodium control is the main electrolyte that controls extracellular fluid balance. Potassium is the main electrolyte that controls intercellular fluid balance. And what will happen is when you start getting low on sodium and to a depleted level, you'll start pulling potassium out of your cells. And that's when things go really bad, and it takes hours to recover from. That's when that starts to occur. If you just get a little depleted on sodium, you can replace the sodium really quickly and bounce right back. But if you get to the point of starting to pull potassium out of your cells, then it gets really bad.
Yeah.